So, the Ascension Astrology of the 2020s. We're going to start today with a poem. And this is a poem from my book, Codex of the Soul. Astrology is a spiritual practice, and it's called The Journey of Your Soul. Once upon a night, you were mountaintop, a child of awe, humbled by the majesty of innumerable pulsing light beings, frolicking in the forever echo of infinite star songs. You gazed upon a celestial theater. Some lights shimmered fiery red incandescence, some cool blue contemplation, some huddled together in packs, and others followed their own path. Each was a candle and a character, a story to illuminate the mysterious feelings within. You were alone, but with 100 billion mirrors. You wove a song of sacred magic that would persist the whole night through. And that song would continue as long as you climbed to the mountaintop, as long as you turned your pensive gaze upward and tuned your open heart heavenward and allowed your imagination to meet its maker, the divine encounter. Remember? Unplug your frail electric umbilical cord. No television, no computer, no sound system, no environment to mediate between you and the dimensions beyond. Simply the quiet, vast, unfathomable sky. The holy star family, the luminous tribes of the night. So, this is our journey today, our return to essence. This was a class that I taught earlier this year, and I'm going to be sharing some teachings from it that I feel are really aligned with the journey ahead, the journey of all of our souls into this next decade. So this course, Wisdom Practices to Awaken the Shaken Heart, it's teachings from both Indian and Tibetan Tantra yoga, Stoic philosophy, and shamanism. And so I'm going to just bring in some of those teachings throughout. And one of the main teachings from the Stoics, who, you know, we have the wrong concept of the Stoics. It sounds all serious and sober. The Stoics were more about how to find the virtuous life and to build our character. And they're really the most practical philosophy I found for today. And that's why I wanted to teach a course about the wisdom of the Stoics. But one of their techniques, a couple of their techniques for, opening our consciousness is to meditate on the vastness of space, the infinitudes of time, and to be in the sort of the beauty of relativity and sort of comparing my experience to other experiences. When we get into those heavier spaces of our life, when we're feeling down or distraught or depressed, to really put everything into perspective. And this is about perspective today. When we're looking out 10 years, you know, we're trying to be kind of way showers or torchbearers for what's coming. And this is not so much a predictive type of journey today. It's more of a map for the territory ahead. And so one of the quotes from Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, is that he says the Pythagoreans, who were a mystic school, a tradition that is part of the mystery school traditions, which we will be speaking about next week in a webinar. The Pythagoreans bid us in the morning to look to the heavens, that we may be reminded of those bodies which continually do the same things and in the same manner perform their work, and also be reminded of their purity and nudity, for there is no veil over a star. And again, it gives us that sense of, like, when we think about the hundreds of thousands of light years between us and the closest star, and when we think of this cosmic perspective, we can really feel ourselves as part of this great web of life that goes on forever. And that, Marcus says, the agitations that beset you are superfluous, and depend wholly upon judgments of your own. So the idea is to think about the passage, the brief passage from birth to dissolution. And that we are just, we're a small drop in the ocean, but we're part of the ocean. And what we're looking at when we study astrology is we are looking at the wisdom of the ancients, the idea from the Hermetic maxim. The Hermes Trismegistus was, the supposed founder of alchemy, and the whole Hermetic tradition and the Corpus Hermeticum were these mystery tradition, school teachings that really emphasize the idea of as above, so below, and as within, so without. And it's a non-dual idea. And so even though astrology can paint the individual and paint the moment in very, very specific ways, it is actually a language like the Stoic philosophy, or like Tantra, or like A Course in Miracles, which I'll talk about today as well, which in its essence is non-dual, because it's showing a picture of the sky at your moment and how your soul is connected to the infinite, to the all. Now, it also shows us the stuck patterns that we get into, both collectively and individually. So astrology is a tool for pattern recognition, and then it can provide wisdom and compassion, which are the two tenets of Tibetan Buddhism, of Tibetan Tantra, Vajrayana. And when we get triggered, we can tend those wounds with wisdom and with compassion, because we have a language to navigate through those samskaras, those karmic attachments that we all have. In fact, the planets were known as grahas in India. Grahas means grasping, as in a kind of force that grasps us when we descend from the pure immaterial soul stuff that we are, the star stuff that we are, and we descend through the fixed stars down through the planets. And each planet is like a teacher, as Plato taught in his tradition. Plato taught that each planet was like an archetypal initiator for us. And so we're going to look at the planets today as teachers, as initiators, as messengers of consciousness. Now, one of the things that astrology also teaches us and has taught us is that it's been actually the source for all the religions throughout time. And again, this is something we'll talk a lot more about in a webinar next week, and in this mystery school that is coming through us at this time. It's something that's been with me since the beginning of studying astrology. Here you see an image of Christ. We're going to talk about Christ, but it's connected with the 12 disciples here and the 12 signs of the zodiac. And this has to do with the idea of the solar hero, which Christ represents. And that's the hero within all of us. We're all on a journey like the sun through the year. This is the passage right now where the sun is entering the underworld. In the sign of Libra, Libra was Hades' chariot in the ancient world. And then Hades' realm is the realm of Scorpio, the underworld. It's actually a journey of the soul into the underworld. And we're going to see that the soul moves like the sun through the wheel of the year. And that's part of the teaching of the solar cult. These were the 4 ancient cults. Jocelyn today talked a little bit about the lunar cult, which is very connected with the feminine and the dark goddess. So we will talk a lot more about this next week. Where we are now is at a very significant moment. The eclipses in the sky, which mark the initiatory collective journey that we're going through, are at the significant place that we call the galactic center. This is the source of consciousness. These are the symbols up here, the south node and the north node of these nodes, which are the moons and the paths, the moon and the sun's path crossing. And the south node is in Sagittarius, whereas the north node is in Gemini. And the galactic center is around 27 degrees of Sagittarius. So this year, we have been infused with receiving information, karmic information, which the south node represents, the soul history of the entire collective consciousness, because we come from that black hole center at the heart of the galaxy. The Milky Way was pictured, and Jocelyn spoke to it today, as the body of Nut, the great goddess of the sky, the celestial goddess of all, the great mother goddess, the Milky Way, right? The Milky Way that gives life to everything. Well, the galactic center is right at the heart of that. And you know, the last time we had the nodes at the galactic center was 2012. And we know that this was an opening into a portal of consciousness that the Mayans predicted for a long time. Now, the next time we'll have the nodes hitting the galactic center will be 2029 at the end of the decade. So we are at this peak moment of transition right now. And one of the things that we know about the nodes is that they were called the dragon's head and the dragon's tail, Rahu and Ketu. And it relates to the Ouroboros and the idea of eating our own tail or eating the karma, like, you know, kind of where we need to purge and purify the old stuff. And I'm going to talk about that as we go here. Now, one of the ways that we want to do this is approaching the information, the ideas, the experiences that we're having right now, collectively and personally, with the guidance of the deepest and highest and truest part of ourselves. And in Tibetan Buddhism, the path that we do this through is called deity yoga. And deity yoga is where we envision or meditate on the most pure aspects of consciousness. And here you see this is a very ancient deity in the Tibetan tradition called Manjushri. Manjushri is the god of wisdom, or the deity of wisdom, the Buddha of wisdom. And he, like Michael or Mikael from the Christian tradition, is also wielding the sword of truth. And this is what we have to do at this time, because Gemini and Sagittarius, where the nodes are signs that have to do with information and ideas, Gemini. Whereas Sagittarius is about philosophy and finding meaning in our life. But what we're talking about here is the discernment to slice through all of the noise, all of the misinformation, and come to a realization of what is relative truth and what is absolute truth. And absolute truth has to do with emptiness, that we are not really an egoic self. This is a passing phase of incarnational journey. In the language of multidimensional consciousness or channeling, we might say that we chose to forget for a little while that we're multidimensional. We thought, you know, what would it be like if I could go into the world and kind of forget that I am a multidimensional being of light, and I come from the infinite source, and I could play in this third dimension where there seems to be linearity and time and limitation and otherness and separation, right? And that's all the relative truths. And Gemini as a sign is very good at like kind of comparing and contrasting the relative truths, but it can get very stuck there. And the beauty of Sagittarius that we're remembering right now with the South Node is how to find meaning on the quest for truth. To be seekers like Sage, the sage of wisdom, the Sagittarius, right? That archer with the bow. And the bow, you know where it points? It points to the galactic center. It points to our source. So the other thing, though, is that Sagittarius could be a sign that gets into dogma and self-righteous philosophy. We've seen that a lot, right? And everything going on politically and in the media. And so we have to always look at this high side of Gemini, which is about emergence of educating ourselves. We're in a new world right now. We have to be willing to understand the impermanent nature of reality, the ephemeral nature of things, and to educate ourselves about what's happening in the now, in every moment. And one of the things we do is we have to use technology to do that, which we're doing with this presentation right now. So remember this as we go through. And also that Gemini Sagittarius, the black hole at the galactic center, it's connected with the Black Madonna. Again, here's an image of the Black Madonna and the stars around her. And the black, the void, the womb, the great mystery, right? As we learned about this morning from Jocelyn, this is our source energy. And we are tapping into it right now. That's why we did this event at this time, because we are receiving so much from all of our galactic family. This is including the Lyrans and the star Vega, right? We did a journey to Deneb today. You see here star Sirius, Isis in the tradition. Sirius has been sacred to many traditions, but we have a channel coming into this this event who's going to receive information and guidance from the Sirian star system. And I know it's a system that I feel very connected with. And here you see Arcturus, another star family that we're connected with. Down here, my my deepest connection and intimate bondedness is with the Palladian energies, and this is the Palladian star cluster right here, and Alcyon, the central star of the Pleiades. Maybe you feel a connection with one of these stars or star families. Maybe it's Sirius or Vega and Lyra, the constellation. The Lyrians, the Sirians, the Arcturians, the Palladians, these are extra dimensional beings that are part of our own galactic inheritance. And at this time, and I believe in the next 10 years, we are going to open our consciousness in ways that when we were born, we might not have known are possible, because we're going to more and more receive guidance, information, visions, insights from our galactic families. And you may already be doing that now through dreams, through synchronicities, through meeting your star families. Like sometimes when we feel these Egyptian connections, we start to connect with Sirius, right? Or, we listen to a Palladian channel and we really feel this resonance. So tune into that, right? That is connection with your star family, with your inheritance and your ancestry, your ancestors. Now I want to talk to you for a moment about body. Now this is a very deep tradition and something we're going to continue to paint in the next coming weeks and webinars and teachings of the Mystery School. But what's really valuable here is, I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. I don't know if that's Jocelyn or anyone else, but there is a little bit of background noise. But here's the rainbow body. Now, what is the rainbow body? Maybe you've seen this image of Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava was the great Buddhist saint who brought the teachings of Buddhism out of Tibet into India, and it started to spread all over Asia. And he's known as the second Buddha. But I want to talk to you for a moment about the rainbow body, because this is known also as the body of light, the glorified body. And it's not just a Tibetan tradition, but one of the most powerful things is that this school called Dzogchen, the Great Perfection Teachings, it's interesting because the Tibetans themselves will say that this teaching of the rainbow body is actually taught on 12 other star systems. This is really fascinating because in a lot of the art of the Tibetan tradition, you see this kind of rainbow portal. Now, you don't only see this in the Tibetan tradition. Here's something you see in the work of Alex Gray, the great visionary artist. Here's the chakric body. Here's the Dorje Vajra of Tibetan Buddhism. Here's that rainbow portal. But you'll also see it in the mystic Christian tradition, especially when you see the ascension and the transfiguration, not only of Christ, but of Jesus, but of Mary as well. This rainbow Vesica Pisces here. You also see it in Egypt. Here is the ascension of Jesus in this sort of luminous cloak, like Osiris over here. The white garment of light, the purified body. And here is the star, and here is the portal. And there are these theories that this rainbow body is like the stargate, a way for us to travel through the dimensions, right? To connect with our extra dimensional energy. Let's go back here to look at this. You always see these 5 primary colors. And this is fascinating because in the Tibetan tradition, the chakras were 5 in number. And that's why when you look at the sacred images, you'll see the 5 colors, because they're actually connected with our own energy body, our chakra system in the Tibetan tradition. So I really wanted to tune you into this because I believe that as we move, especially deeper into a lot of the Aquarian vibration, which is coming hugely this next year, with Jupiter and Saturn going into Aquarius, then Pluto going into Aquarius. And then we have all of this kind of air energy that's very dominant in the later part of the decade. I really believe that we're being asked to activate our light body, our rainbow body. And it's, again, a universal cross-cultural tradition. It's something that was called in Sufism the most sacred body. And it was activated during the whirling dervish practices. If you know about those practices, I got to be a part of that in Turkey a few years ago. It's called the diamond body in Taoism as well. It's also called the radiant body in Gnosticism, a sacred mystery tradition, which we'll talk more about next week. The immortal body in the Corpus Hermeticum. And then the Aku, the embracing Aku, like the track that we listened to. Many different traditions speaking to this body of light, this rainbow body. But it's essential, if we're going to activate the rainbow body, that we do the work of purification. And here we see Osiris in his very interesting long cap here, which we could talk about some other time, but because we see that that might be connected with these extra dimensional energies. But we see the garment of light, the garment of purification, before moving to the next life. And this is a very important process that all of us are going through, is the purging and the purification. I also believe that one of the things that we are working towards is a great teaching from A Course in Miracles. And it's about purifying our perception. And this is the greatest test for us to do right now, when we're in the midst of the coronavirus, of election season in the US. And there's so much temptation to judge and to, point fingers and to feel all kinds of heavy energy. And what the Course teaches is something very similar to what we call Shiva Drishti in the tantric tradition of Shaiva Tantra in India. And it's about perceiving as the divine, as the Christ. Again, Christ consciousness, the glorified body. What does it say in the Course? When it talks about forgiveness in this great small text called the Song of Prayer, I really, really recommend you check out the Manual for Teachers and the Song of Prayer. It says, do not see air, do not make it real. Select the loving and forgive the sin by choosing in its place the face of Christ. How otherwise can prayer return to God? Can you remember him and hate what he created? This is so powerful. As prayer is always for yourself, so is forgiveness always given you. And it goes on to say, wisdom is not judgment, it is the relinquishment of judgment. Make then but one more judgment. It is this: there is someone with you whose judgment is perfect, your creators. He does know all facts, present, past, and future to come. He knows all the efforts, and his judgment is perfect in every way. Therefore, lay judgment down, not with regret, but with a sigh of gratitude. Now you are free of a burden so great that you could merely stagger and fall down beneath it. And it was all illusion, for you could not judge anyways. You would have to know all that has ever been and all that ever will be. So it goes on, but I find this so touching because the idea here is to look on our brothers and our sisters, our politicians, our elders, our children as the Christ body, as that glorified body, as that rainbow body. And as we do that, as we see them with the eyes of forgiveness, with the eyes of oneness, we purify our perception and we raise our own vibration. We expand our own vibration so that the kingdom of heaven is here now, imminent, because we are perceiving it that way. And this is what we mean by Shiva Drishti, the eye of Shiva, or the source, which is called Shiva in Tantric Shaiva Tantra. So, all right, let's take a breath. Beautiful. Considerations. Let's look at the archetypes of evolution. The word consider means to be with the stars, consider. And sidereal has to do with the stars. So when you consider something, you take the stars into reference. Today, we're going to talk about the dominant planetary themes, the archetypal motifs that are going to govern the collective psyche and influence our personal affairs over the next couple years, 10 years as a whole. I want to mention the work of two very esteemed astrologers and teachers, Rick Tarnas and Ren Butler. Ren will be interviewed this week. He'll be presenting, and I'm so excited to be a part of that interview. I'm actually in a course with him right now as well. But both of them are archetypal astrologers who've done incredibly deep work, working with altered states of consciousness, and like breath work and psychedelic and entheogenic therapy, and connecting them with transits and cycles of the archetypes, and also what happens within the womb process, which we call birth perinatal matrices. So Rick Tarnas is really the grandfather of this work, where he studied throughout time when planets come together in the sky. So right now we had Saturn and Pluto, which I'll talk about in a minute. And in Rick's work, you could study the whole of history with Saturn, Pluto, conjunctions or squares or oppositions. And that's what Rick did. And he saw all of the different kinds of things happening in culture and religion and philosophy. And we're going to dive into that today. So that's when we talk about planetary pairs, where they come together in the sky. Now, planets moving into different signs, we're going to talk about today. But I want you to remember that I'm speaking from a Western tradition. And in India, the planets will be in different signs. This is because of the different kinds of zodiacs we use. So just take that into consideration today, that again, many different perspectives. We're moving into a world that is, choose your own adventure. And so remember that as we move into this journey, that there are many perspectives. And today we'll be using the planets moving into signs in the Western zodiac. One of the most fascinating things that will happen as we move through the decade of the 2020s is that we will see that the outer planets, which we'll be introducing in a moment, the outer planets govern the collective psyches, and they move very slowly. But Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are those planets. And they will move from feminine signs at the beginning of the decade, Taurus to Gemini for Uranus, and then Neptune is in Pisces, then moving to Aries, and then Pluto moves from Capricorn to Aquarius. They're moving from feminine signs to masculine. So we're going to start off in this very dream body, in this very earthy, watery, where we harness the imagination, the dreams, the past, the myths, the archetypes, and the concrete nature of the earth element, right? The today, the here, the now, the practical. And we move more and more into this more ethereal, immaterial, future-oriented air and fire elements, where we are very creative, things move very fast. And so we're kind of dreaming that evolution and that acceleration into being in the first part of this decade. Now we start with Mars squared Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. This has been going on since the end of August, and it's really, really an intense energy. So let's break it down, because we are being activated by this Jupiter-Pluto-Saturn conjunction all year. And you've probably heard about this if you studied astrology at all, but we are in the darkest planetary pair there is, Saturn and Pluto. It's where we find that there are massacres historically and dictatorships, right? Pandemics is historically part of this. Frustration can happen. The last Saturn-Pluto conjunction also had the slave trade as part of it. And we've had all of those issues come up with the protests in the US and the Black Lives Matter movement. On the personal level, we are being, cathartically invited to work with our shadows. And it is a breakdown of the dysfunctional ego. The capitalistic, consumeristic, like hoarding mentality that has governed us for so long. And the idea that we could just get what we want when we want, and now we can't. And so there are karmic encounters that, invite us to deeper soul study and deeper pattern recognition. And this is the high side of Saturn Pluto. It's a journey into the esoteric, into the occult, into the great mystery, into the dark goddess, to access that wisdom. And really, it's about purification, like we were talking about. Because if we are going to raise our vibration in this next decade, if we're going to access the rainbow body, the light body, an ascensional path where we connect multidimensionally, we have to get all of this detritus out of us. And I think that this is happening on the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And so when we're triggered now, we have to take that with gratitude and forgiveness, and not with reactivity. Again, my shadow grows to new heights. So I want to ask everyone to consider that all of us are in a journey of shamanic dismemberment at this time. If you study the history of shamanism, and you've been on that path at all, you know that the initiatory process was not pleasant. It was always very difficult. And it involved a death and rebirth process. Typically, you would see visions as a neophyte shaman. You would be going through a journey where you're literally your bones, your substance would be ripped out from you. You would be disemboweled. You would be, and every part of you would be outside of you, right? You would be torn to shreds. And then you would be fed back your innards, so to speak. It's very grotesque imagery. But the idea here is a complete purging of ourselves. Like if you've ever done the ayahuasca work and that ceremony, where we purge. And so I believe that potentially COVID and this virus has come to heal us on so many levels, to purge the collective consciousness, like this Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. This is the Jupiter, the inspiring part of this transit is that we need to be cleansed out. And maybe a lot of us are healthier than we were at the beginning of the year. That's one possibility. There is a potential, right, that a lot of people have stopped drinking, have stopped smoking, have, really tuned into health, the diet that they're eating. So I'm interested to hear actually from people here, you could put it in the chat, if you have found that you've become healthier through this process, you've changed your diet in a healthy way, or you've maybe stopped any kind of drinking or other practices, or you've really looked at any addictive patterns within yourself during this year of Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. I'd really like to hear from people about that, because I think that's what a kind of evolutionary storyline that is unfolding. I think it really has to do with us being able to access this purified state of consciousness. Yeah, I see stop drinking here from Nicole. Taking time to connect with family and nature. Absolutely. Nature, the great healer. Mentally healthier. Yep. People working on addictions like sugar. And another thing is that as the Stoics teach us, this coronavirus and Saturn, Pluto has forced us to connect with our own death, our own mortality, which could be one of the healthiest processes we go through. Because as Marcus Aurelius says, do every act of your life as if it were your last. Think of your life as, that this is the last day, that you have died today and your life story has ended. What would you do if this was your last day? It puts everything into perspective, and we live in a much more kind of full way. Now, let's move into Jupiter and Saturn. Let's move into this. Look at this image of Jupiter here, right? This sort of mosaic of just gas and all this crazy artistic energy from Jupiter. Jupiter gives us the faith and optimism, the trust and inspired wisdom teachings, the openness to synchronicity that brings meaning to the secret questing for truth. Whereas Saturn brings us the strength and tenacity, the demand and discipline, the strategy and ambition to do the thing you don't want to do, but you must do to mature. Saturn is the taskmaster, and Jupiter is the inspirer. And here's Pluto. Pluto, the force of the volcano, the capacity to destroy and to rebirth, the evolutionary commandment to confront the unconscious, wrestle with, and then wear your shadow as a garment of empowerment. So we're wearing the shadow as a garment of empowerment in order to allow the light fully in. Right? We're merging the light and shadow. We're not one or the other. We're a complete journey of all. And in the extra dimensional teachings, we learned that, the extremes that we experience in the third dimension that we're in here, it's more like a beautiful kind of gray transparency as you expand into other dimensions. It's not so extreme as it is in here with the shadow and the light. And so I want to show you this image of Vajrasattva here. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes after you take a moment to be with Vajrasattva. Because Vajrasattva, whose name means the lightning being or the thunderbolt being, which is sort of the idea of like the truth being, yeah? It's a purification meditation. The simple mantra for Vajrasattva is Om Vajrasattva Om. Om Vajrasattva Om. And, if you want to close your eyes, the meditation for Vajrasattva, it's about breathing light into our being. And so I'm going to invite you to touch one hand on your heart and touch your other hand on your belly and breathe. Take a deep breath in from the sky, from the heavens, and breathe it down into your head, down through your crown. And it's this golden nectar of pure light, the pure light of consciousness, breathing it down into the heart and letting it purify any defilements, any shadows that are holding you down, or like, this detritus, this old stuff that needs to be transmuted in the light of alchemy. So take that breath in and sink it down deep into your cells. And on the exhale, purge and purify any of the old stories, the samskaras, the karmic attachments. And again, on the inhale, breathe in that pure light of the sun and the source of the sun, the light of consciousness itself. We call it the prakasha, luminous nature. Breathe that in and just infuse all the cells of your beings, all of your soul and spirit and body. And send whatever isn't serving being an emissary of the truth, of the consciousness, send it down to the earth to be composted. And so Vajrasattva, in that pure light, his body is pure, transparent, white light, reminds us to be clear and transparent, to purge ourselves. So let's take a breath and open our eyes. Reconnect with Vajrasattva. Here you see again the rainbow garment. And moving forward, let's look at this great conjunction that is going to happen at the end of this year. It's called the Great Conjunction because Jupiter and Saturn have been studied for millennia by all traditions of astrology. And it's always been an evolutionary phase shift for the collective consciousness. Now, they connect every 20 years. That's not the big deal. They'll meet in the sky. But what's interesting is that, yes, that will be an overarching theme by sign that they're in and by element that they're in by conjunction. This year, they'll meet in Aquarius, at the beginning degrees of Aquarius. But what's more important is that every 200 years or so, they change the element that they're in. So they've been in Earth for the last 200 years for the most part. And now they're going to move into air signs every 20 years where they meet in the sky. And so the archetypal motif is going to have a lot to do with air. And air is very fast. Air is about information and ideas, consciousness. It's about communication, technology, innovation, airborne diseases as well. So here are the dates that Saturn moves into Aquarius and Jupiter moves into Aquarius. Just right at the solstice, they will meet. It's going to be a very powerful solstice. They're going to leave Capricorn, all the work that we've been doing and getting rid of these old structures, right? Jupiter has been saying we need to expand out of these old structures of systems and institutions and governments and education that don't work for us anymore. Even the travel that has been sucking the resources of the earth, it's not sustainable. Now Jupiter, here's the archetype of the greatest, biggest planet in the solar system, Jupiter, which really can act like a sun itself. And Jupiter brings intuition and growth and expansion. This is a mandala, a planetary mandala I included in my first book, Codex of the Soul. And you see the Wheel of Fortune here and opportunity, the eagle, Jupiter riding here, the guru, the teacher. And then here's Saturn. Saturn has a lot to do with the fates that we feel compelled that we must do in life. Saturn is about maturity and time, working with time, Father Time here. Discipline, solitude that we need to be working hard and put in right effort and be responsible in our life. So here's some of the ideas of the Great Conjunction. And remember something really important, that just after this conjunction, so Jupiter and Saturn will be in Aquarius all 2021. Then Saturn will stay in Aquarius through 2022 into 2023. And by the end of 2023, Pluto just inches into Aquarius. And by 2024, Pluto will be there for the next 20 years. So we're beginning this Aquarian initiation. And that means that the Capricorn structures must be broken down to align with Aquarian ideals. Aquarius is a visionary sign, and it's a sign that's bringing rebellion and revolution. You're going to see a lot more youth movements, protest movements in the next few years, and new leaders in the world. And it's going to really compel the youth to step up. And it's ironic that in the States, we have the oldest presidential candidates ever, which is a symbol of Capricorn. The old world, the status quo, the conservative, which is not our future. And so I feel like as the years unfold here in the next decade, we're going to see a massive rise of the youth. We're also going to see an urgency to climate change, that people are going to wake up and the masses are going to rise up to address our survival here and use the new technologies to help with that process. Free energy is going to be a big theme coming in through wind and solar and other means. You're going to move more and more into service-based jobs, gig economy, and things becoming more totally automated through robotics. I mean, the sign most associated with technological advancement is Aquarius. Drone deliveries from Amazon, viruses from the air. This is a theme that comes with the air element. And disembodiment, time transcendence coming more and more, even the end of gender and that whole concept really changing. Ursula Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness is a sci-fi book that addresses that concept. Now here's something, before we talk about Pluto a little bit more, Tecumseh's Curse. I talked about this back in my talk, which you could still access. It was a donation-based talk. And it's all about, maybe Jocelyn could put the link in the chat, but it was all about the elections of the US as well as the fate of the USA. So we talked about the election day chart next week, inauguration chart, and all of the candidates. But something I shared there was about Tecumseh's Curse, which was laid on the US presidents by a pretty pissed off Shawnee Native American chief because of a dirty dealing over land with William Harrison, one of the presidents. And what happened was William Harrison died the next year after he became president. This curse basically says that every American president in the past 200 years who has been inaugurated on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which we have coming, has either been assassinated or survived an assassination attempt, or else has died while in office. This has only been three different presidents that hasn't happened to. Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, and George W. Bush. Something weird happens, right? Whether it's assassination or an attempted assassination, something really, really bizarre is going to happen. And I think it'd be no surprise to any one of us, especially those of us who live in the US, that something weird's going to go down. So we have to prepare ourselves for that and realize that the true power is coming from within each one of us. And we're going to speak more to that here, that the US is going through a Pluto return. That only happens to a nation, not a person. It happens every 250, 60 years. That is a complete death and resurrection of an entire country. It happened here in England, in France, in Spain, in Russia. That was the deaths of Napoleon, Franco, Stalin, all of the dictators. It was a huge failure in the government, followed by successful development in a different direction. Does that sound familiar in the US? Could it be about a Green New Deal? Well, we'll see that the actual New Deal happened in a very similar cycle that we're in right now and is repeating. So maybe it's time for another one. Could it be the death of the dollar, the end of the Electoral College, all of the viral deaths that are happening? It was also a time where the Industrial Revolution was happening, the French Revolution, the planet Uranus was discovered. So huge revolutionary movements happened that changed the face of reality. We're going to see, as Pluto moves into Aquarius, again, the galactic family, alien channeling. We have revolutionary movements, like I said, cryptocurrency becoming probably dominant by the end of the decade. And again, all of technology just accelerating at a pace that will surprise most of us. And the need to face our fears of death, of mob rule, of fascism, of our own creative power. Now, I want to move into the planet Uranus, because Uranus is very active as well this next year. Uranus will meet Saturn, which we've already introduced you to. But Uranus is the great eccentric. Uranus is at, or his orbit, it's actually on its side. It's the only planet in the solar system that the North Pole points like towards the sun, and then it changes, and then the South Pole does. So it's completely weird and different. And that's part of what Uranus represents. It's less about Uranus, the sky god, who the name comes from. And it's more about Prometheus, the Titan, who stole the fire from the gods to gift it to humanity, to liberate humanity so they wouldn't be the slaves of the gods. And so Uranus represents freedom, rebellious energy, innovation, and inventive spirit, and being wild, being different, trying something new, experimentation, liberation. So here's where we are in the next couple years. Saturn and Uranus are going to square. Saturn, order, right? Think of the rings of Saturn, right? Think of the beauty of Saturn. I've been looking at Saturn through my telescope, and I could see the rings, and I'm just in awe. Whenever I watch those, those documentaries on Saturn, and you're just like, it looks perfect. There's even a sacred geometric pattern, the hexagon right here at the North Pole of Saturn. It's perfect. Six arms of the hexagon. It's actually a storm, hundreds of years old. But everything about Saturn is about structure and about discipline and about order. And everything about Uranus is about breakthrough, new levels of consciousness, different, experimentation. They're completely different energies. Uranus is very youthful. Saturn is very much about the elder, the old, the tradition. Uranus is the eruption of something new. And they're going to be squaring tensely against each other all of 2021 and 22. It begins right at the beginning of the year. And so some of the themes include when these two come together by a square, conjunction, or an opposition, those tense aspects, that we have to become responsible, Saturn, and balanced with our freedom, Uranus. We have to be careful and cautious with our change. We can't just change very quickly, or we're going to have some negative repercussions. There's usually death in one area of life succeeded by birth in another. And there's a liberating side of structure and routine. We start to see that Saturn, if we can get structured and disciplined and focused, then we can actually become more authentically our individual selves, Uranus. Now, we also might see that structures shift very quickly. Systems, governments, they tend to topple very quickly under Saturn square Uranus or Saturn-Uranus energy. We might find costs and limitations on our freedom. And you definitely will see always through history a tension between liberal and conservative, between reactionary and progressive, past and future, you know, the old and the new. And so we can also self-actualize Uranus through hardship and limitation. It's like, well, I have to stay at home in quarantine. Well, I'm going to make a bunch of art, right? I'm going to create a bunch of music. I'm going to write that book I never did before. Because I have a limitation, I actually can grow and find my authentic self, my true individual gifts that Uranus represents. So Eleanor Roosevelt had a Saturn-Uranus aspect in her chart, and she said, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So that's your invitation this year, this next year and the year after. Is where are you lighting the candle as opposed to cursing the darkness? And just a little bit of history here. We had the Saturn-Uranus energy back in 2008, which of course we had a financial collapse. We had, of course, the breakdown in the US of the whole housing market. This also happened in 1987, Saturn-Uranus energies in the sky. So this is happening now. There's still a little bit of a facade that the economy is better than it is, but it's collapsing. It could be the misuse of science in the wrong hands. This was when the Nazis' final solution idea came about, an attempt came about. Does that have to do with a vaccine and what might be in the vaccine? Could it be about 5G and, you know, the effects of that? Could it be about border controls and the misuse of governments, you know, trying to control people's movements? That could be one side of it. But on the other side, there could be cultural and philosophical flourishing. It was the beginning of the Renaissance when Saturn and Uranus came through. There was a kind of tragic and comic sexuality and romance represented in the arts, like La Traviata by Verdi. Venus, the goddess, was born from the castration of Saturn, Kronos, of his father Uranus. And she's born of the sea foam from that castration. So art and beauty is born out of this tension between the old and the stuck and the limited and the contraction of Saturn and the eruption of the new and the possible with Uranus. Published of the Dark Night of the Soul with St. John of the Cross. Elizabethan poetry. So the innovation that came in form also happened during Saturn-Uranus. And another fascinating part of history, which is the beginning of the Islamic Empire with the Saracens, which were the founders of Baghdad. Baghdad was the cultural center for almost 700 years, and it birthed the House of Wisdom, which had a translation movement that translated all of the known texts in the world at that time. Study the Islamic Empire. It was the height of civilization and actually gave birth to the Renaissance. Oh, one other thing, Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was the Roman Empire that I said was the Stoic philosopher as well. And his book, The Meditations, came out during the Saturn-Uranus conjunction at that time. So focus on the new and ground it. Don't focus on the negative during this cycle, but really think about magnetics. This is really important. Magnetize what you want in your life. Magnetize the community, the people, the consciousness. This is a very magnetic cycle. And if you put out, you know, what you don't want, that will probably come to you and magnetize to you as well. The online summit and festival of consciousness, like we're a part of right now, is very much a part of this, where we find everyone tapping into their individual gifts and coming into you know, a collective awareness of each other. And again, this idea of 3D or 5D, you know, you might be hearing more and more about what does it mean to live in 5D, and some of the ideas that I've learned about from some of the Palladian channeling have to do with this idea that we can no longer be victims or identify that way. we realize that we are creator beings, that we are connected with our source at every moment, that we can change our reality like that by putting ourselves in a resonant vibration that we want. So, we need to shake out that energy and be cathartic. We need to focus on the positive that we want in our life. We need to open up and do these sky meditations that I'm going to show you next here to release the tension when we get too narrow and dense. In 5D, we know that we're connected to every other being in the cosmos, that we are this one pulsing web of life. So everything is connected, every action means something, and that we have soul contracts with each other. Nothing is accidental. The multiverse is flexible and fluid. And that we move from these black and white judgments like we talked about in 3D. We move to these gray potentials of possibility. We also can connect with our star family and our intergalactic heritage. So I'm going to open everyone up to a journey right now because I want you to bring back some information. And what I want you to do is go to this website. This is my Bandcamp. And we're going to listen to this piece of music, and we're all going to journey into Saturn and Uranus, which is going to be a big energy again for the next 2 years. So I want to invite everyone to journey into this music. So go here to CelestiOwl.bandcamp. I'll put it in the chat. And it's the album Theophany, which you'll see on the side. Okay, so CelestiOwl.bandcamp. Putting it in the chat right now. Okay, that should do it right there. CelestiOwl.bandcamp.album. Oh, sorry, it's not there in the chat. 1 second here. And now it's coming. All right. If you got that, just somebody give a yes that you got that. We're going to do a journey now. And the track is to A Feather to Mend the Dream. A Feather to Mend the Dream. Okay? So it's a 4-minute track. And I want you to invite in the spirits of Saturn and Uranus we've been talking about. And then we're going to do a share. Okay? So let's, right now, I'm going to count down from 5. Get everyone onto the site. Make sure you're on the site. And we're going to start the music. Okay, and then we're going to come back and we're going to share with the group, whoever wants to share. But I want to invite you, what does Saturn and Uranus want from you or from the collective in this next year? Let it be a visionary journey. Let it be a prophetic journey. You are a prophet, you're a seer, you're a sage, journeying into the next year with this music. And what can you bring back for us? All right, so I'm going to start the music on my end, but I invite you to mute. Actually, I'm not gonna start the music on my end because I don't want to confuse everyone. But you can start that music right now, and then we'll come back. So open up to A Feather to Mend the Dream and the Saturn-Uranus journey. right, I want to welcome everyone back from A Feather to Mend the Dream, Saturn-Uranus journey. And would love to hear what you channeled through, what you received about Saturn, about Uranus, about the next year. I felt really out in the stars. Beautiful. Well, there'll be lots of opportunities, hopefully, to be with the stars in the next couple of years, both internally and externally. What did we receive? Did we get a message? Did we feel ourselves in the next few years? How you want to be an individual, partnership with technology will be better. Journey with my future self and my next steps, amazing. It reflected all you spoke about with Saturn Uranus, the blend of what we know with new life and inspiration. Oh, I love Lori's comment. If we don't create, we self-destruct. That is really, really appropriate. Satoida, detach from attachments by healing the child within. Wonderful. Rise up to my own medicine, Mariana. Entered a rainbow ribbon of light. Beautiful. Now, please continue to share your journeys, what you discovered for the group, for the collective, for yourself in the Facebook group. We can't bring anyone on here right now, but this is really, really wonderful. I've had a vision of a tree and a hawk, people walking up into the mountains in a desert type of environment. Our brains were opening and changing, connection to beyond. Wow, Jenna, thank you. Awesome. Okay, let's move forward. I'm going to talk about, can everyone see the screen now? You can keep putting your shares in the chat. So do you see the screen? Yes, Betty? Okay, great. So this is a big energy we want to talk about, which is the dichotomy of control from the Stoics. That you do not have the power to change external events. So you shouldn't get annoyed or irritated with them, right? As Marcus says, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. And Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, men are disturbed not by things, but by the judgments and opinions they take of them. This was something we really focused on in the Return to Essence course. And I really, I just can't emphasize enough that this is part of the Saturn-Uranus energy, that there will be parts of this transit that will feel like, you know, we will maybe be blocked. Maybe it's about travel, you know, maybe it's about something else with the government. And we can't take it personally. We have to think of it as an opportunity. That's what the Stoics did. They thought of every apparent limitation as an opportunity for growth. So just really meditate with that. All right, let's move forward into, oh, here's a great quote from Marcus. Do not try to be on the side of the majority, but live according to your own inner laws. That is Uranus and Saturn for sure. Now, all right, so we did that. And, you know, one thing that I invite everyone to do is when you get into those tense moments, when you get into the stress, the heaviness, the overwhelm, the pressure, you know, which can really amp up when Mars squares Saturn and Pluto, more exact in about a month from now, and the end of the year. Remember to sky gaze. Remember to open up to sky mind. This is actually part of the Vijnana Bhairava, one of the Tantra teachings from Return to Essence. Oh, Jocelyn just put the link to the course there. If you guys want to check that course out, it was such a beautiful journey through the chakras and through Tantra and Stoicism. But this is the text we studied, the Vijnana Bhairava. And one of the ways that we self-realize that's described in this book is by looking at the clear sky with uninterrupted gaze. Just remaining completely still and just open your consciousness to the vastness of that. And then you attain the form of Bhairava or Shiva. Bhairava is the fierce version of Shiva. And all of the practices in Return to Essence are, and in the Vijnana Bhairava, are about self-realization. And they're very simple, some of them, but we forget to just stop and look at the sky and merge our consciousness, open our head to the vastness and our heart to the infinite in the sky. And as the Course in Miracles says, the thought that you should have every day is a thought of joy, a thought of peace, a thought of limitless release. And that connects us with God, with our source. Here's where Uranus is right now. Taurus. Uranus is in the sign of the earth, the feminine. And here's some of the themes that you can think about with Uranus and Taurus. A revolutionary shock in resources and our relation to the earth. Chaotic earth changes. Uranus brings chaos. We've seen that with the fires and with, all of the storms. Sudden need to stay home. Self-reinvention within one's own resources, the food, the garden. Yeah. This transit's going to affect all Taurus types of people a lot. You are the innovators. You're the experimenters. You're the cutting edge, the revolutionaries, the leaders. Radical shifts are coming in the economy. New value systems, which have a lot to do with the earth, permaculture, cryptocurrency, the decentralized finance. If you haven't studied DeFi, please start to do it. Study about Bitcoin, Ethereum. Think about prioritizing where your resources are, putting them into the land, maybe property, and real things. But also, cryptocurrency is where we're going. Lot to study there. Robot labor is part of Uranus and Taurus. Abrupt, innovative changes to the landscape, Taurus, to our living spaces. Everyone's working on their homes right now. And then Ubuntu, contributionism. Look into that. I spoke about it in my elections of 2020 talk. Workers' groups and local economies and revolutions arise out of some poverty or famine or drought or the need for other physical resources. Uranus was in Taurus at the beginning of World War II in 1934, 1942, the last time Uranus was there. But there is something very potentially destructive during this cycle that changes the face of the earth. And Winston Churchill said, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. That statement, how accurate is that for today? And that's what's interesting when you study the planets in previous cycles that are the same cycle, Uranus and Taurus in this case, you see these resonant archetypal themes, even the phrases will resonate through time. And this was, again, the New Deal spread throughout the US, and it helped the recovery from the Great Depression. And maybe we're going to need a new US New Deal here and around the world to get us out of an economic depression. Now, the next big cycle that comes in is Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces. Now, this is a very brief transit, but I want to mention it here because there's Jupiter and there's Neptune, because they're both in the sign that they rule during that time. In modern astrology, Neptune rules Pisces. In traditional astrology, Jupiter rules Pisces. This is going to be a potentially very big breakthrough in consciousness, especially around the ideas of unity, of spiritual evolution, of the collective consciousness knowing itself as that. Maybe this is a massive awakening moment for the collective. We realize we're all in the dream. Something very potent happens during this cycle. There can be a Messiah complex, but it can also be a self-realization of the Christ consciousness of the rainbow body. Maybe it's also a connection with our interdimensional family, galactic families on a mass level at that moment. But something big is happening. And so I mentioned Lao Tzu's work as being very connected with this transit of Jupiter, Neptune in Pisces. Very big, March to May 2022. Now, I believe that that is when we have a potential for a mass awakening and divine identification. This is an image of Shiva, and this is one of the texts, Vijnana Bhairava, that says the highest Lord is omniscient, all-knowing, omnipotent, all-powerful, and omnipresent everywhere. Since I have the attributes of Shiva, I am the same as the highest Lord. With this firm conviction, one becomes what one already is, Shiva. This is the essence of the entire teachings of the Vijnana Bhairava, that we are no different than our source, than that all-powerful, all-present, all-knowing self, Shiva. And more, if we can identify this way and see through the eyes of the Christ, see through the eyes of Shiva, we will be living that transit even before it comes. So Jupiter, Neptune in Pisces, beautiful visionary transit coming in 2022. And there's another brief transit, Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Taurus at the end of 2024. And Jupiter Uranus is extremely accelerated energy. Technology moves fast. There's all this new energy experimentation. We'll have a Jupiter Uranus square for just a few weeks at the end of this year, beginning of next year. You'll feel something accelerate and move very quickly. But it's innovative, freedom and revolutionary impulses expand. Think of 1969. Think of Jimi Hendrix bringing the electric guitar. Nobody had seen anything like that. The moon landing, right? Completely new paradigms of consciousness. So something similar might erupt at the beginning of this year. I think it might be some revolutionary protest movements around the planet, and something new birthing. Now, Pisces is where Neptune has been. Here is the great archetype of the visionary, of compassion, of the Buddha, of the Christ. Neptune represents spirit and our return to source. It can also represent victimization, the hanged man there, getting lost in dissolution in the oceans of consciousness. Here you see Van Gogh, right? Madness and genius together, right? But Neptune's been in Pisces and will be until 2025. Visionary fantasy, art, dance, music, literature. I mean, this has been the age, the last 10 years of, all of the great, trilogies and stories for children, all the archetypes and myths coming through so deeply. We have seen just art explode on this planet. And that will continue the next few years. Now, with Saturn conjunct Neptune, that's the other big transit of the decade. So by the end of Neptune in Pisces, we're going to see Saturn moving to Neptune. Fascinating, because Neptune will then go into Aries by the end of 2025. And shortly after that, Saturn will go into Aries. So we're going to see this huge shift from this sort of Pisces divine self-remembrance, the end of the zodiac, into the beginning of zodiac, with both Saturn and Neptune finishing Pisces conjunct and then moving into Aries. But we have 2 years of that conjunction. So what could that mean? Could it mean that we actually implement, realize, practicalize, right? Saturn, the Neptune and Pisces vision of oneness. Could this be that we bring a utopian world into being? That we see the eco-villages popping up all over the world in our local communities, right? That we bring art and medicine, entheogens, consciousness, archetypal work, dream work, breath work, meditation is really spread on the planet and implemented into education. There's a lot of possibilities with this. Saturn, Neptune can bring a lot of different archetypes together, It can bring quiet centeredness and integrity, but also modesty, deflation, humble, grounded spirituality. Sometimes we feel disillusionment and disappointment because we have that big vision of Neptune, but then Saturn comes in and is like, but here's all the hard work, or here's the limitation to that, right? So we have to find the middle way. And we have to realize that the divine discontent we can feel, that divine longing for our source that we can feel while we're in the body, can actually make us more committed to a devotional, dedicated spiritual path. That it's not easy to realize the utopia or the possibility. We have to do the work. So Saturn Uranus, to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palms of your hand and eternity in an hour. Wow, that is Saturn Neptune, right? The most minuscule, the most practical, right here in front of me, to the vastness. And that's from William Blake, the great poet, philosopher, mystic, artist. Saturn Neptune opposition in his chart. And again, to perceive everything as an aspect of the divine is the Saturn Neptune. Everything, even things that appear ugly or we don't like sensually, they're still aspects of the divine, right? That's very Saturn Neptune. So there is a history of Saturn Neptune with women's and workers' rights. And I think that you're going to see a massive movement for women leadership during that time. It will be another election season in the US. Maybe it'll be female president. Queen Elizabeth I and II, the first and second, came to power during that time. The Bronte sisters wrote their book. Witchcraft is a major theme of Saturn Neptune. But it can also be harsh reality, Saturn, harshness, that affects the Neptune collective, the massive deaths of World War I. And unfortunately, it has a lot to do with plagues, like the bubonic plague, the potato famine, the Spanish flu, and in the late 80s, the AIDS movement. Berlin Wall toppled. So Neptune's spirit, the oneness, destroyed the wall, the Saturn symbol of division and separation. And I think that this will be a more universal implementation of entheogenic therapy or psychedelic therapy with ketamine, with mushrooms, with cannabis, with DMT, with ayahuasca. We're going to see that we're going to be able to use these tools more and more universally as healing, as preparation for death, and so on and so forth. We might realize the exo-society, connect with our galactic civilizations. So I can't spend too long on these beautiful quotes, but these are all Saturn Neptune quotes. And here's Walt Whitman, who said, "Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." And that's really the Saturn Neptune, right? That we might be in this body, in this limited form, but we contain the all. Neptune moving into Aries in 2025, the last time was during the US Civil War. Kind of feels like we're already there. But idealization of future pioneer, the competitive warrior, and you make it up as you go. So Neptune, wherever Neptune is, there's an idealization of an archetype. There is a projection of what could be. And with Aries, it's going to be a brand new spirituality, a brand new vision of who we are. And I think, robotics combined, AI combined with all other technology accelerating, combined with virtual reality, combined with, however politics is looking at the time, and our connection with our extra dimensional or extra galactic, extraterrestrial selves, all of it may kind of congeal together at this time. And we may awaken to a whole new sense of who we are. Especially because Gemini is where Uranus will go next, right after Neptune moves into Aries. And so Uranus will bring a revolution in the mind, Gemini. Perception itself is going to change, and new tools and new technologies will happen. We can't, we've only seen it in sci-fi, in movies like AI, or movies like Minority Report. self-driving cars, flying cars, flight, remember air element. So something is going to be revolutionized around flight, especially because the first supersonic flight happened during Uranus and Gemini. And the first round the world flight happened in 73 hours. We get very mental during this time. And you're just going to see holography as it was in 3D images, 3D printing, thinking about how that's going to emerge in the next 10 years. The first UFO sightings, at least recorded, were during Uranus and Gemini. And again, this leads to the idea of our exo society, which means, our connection with, exoplanets, life on other star systems, life on other planetary moons. So I may be talking a little bit fast because we have another presentation after this, and I don't want to cut too much into it. So we're going to go a few minutes over here, but maybe we can get the slides to people. So the big transit when Uranus moves into Gemini is a trine to Pluto. Pluto and Aquarius, the two air signs, Gemini and Aquarius. This might be the time when we have the brain machine interface that Elon Musk is talking about. Neuralink, trading brain disorders, helping people who had accidents, creating a brain machine interface, and building towards a potential symbiosis with artificial intelligence. Wow. So there is a lot here that can be happening by the end of the decade. And before we leave today, I want to just show you about the telescopes that are being built and introduce you to some very important things that are going to happen. This is the LSST, which is the Large Survey of Space and Time, the Synoptic Space Telescope. This is being built in the Atacama Desert of Chile, and it is going to, its whole purpose is to understand dark matter and dark energy, to be able to see, basically, it's going to take pictures of the sky, it's over time. So I'll read you this description here. It's going to survey the nighttime sky. And it's it will move quickly between images, yet its large mirror and large field of view, almost 10 square degrees of the sky, 40 times the size of the moon. 40 times the size of the moon is the telescope. It's going to bring more light from the faintest stars in the galaxy. It's going to help us see through time all the way back to the beginnings of the Big Bang. It's surveying the entire night sky in a way that we have never seen before. So we'll see the Milky Way in depth. We could see hazardous asteroids that may be coming towards us. And then we have the James Webb Telescope. Now, both of these are launching in the next couple of years. James Webb is supposed to launch in 2021. This is the most expensive telescope and thing that we've ever built, basically. And the James Webb scope is, $8.8 billion. Infrared observing. And it's going to be way more powerful than Hubble. It will be able to see more light from fainter distant objects all the way back to the Big Bang. 16 times fainter than Hubble, 16 times fainter than Hubble. It's also going to be able to see into the atmospheres of the over 4,000 exoplanets that have been discovered, planets that might harbor life. There are 360 terrestrial planets that have been, talked about as super Earths. Some of them are part of the TRAPPIST-1 system here, which you should study about. It's amazing. And this is what we call they're in the habitable zone, which is like how far a planet is from its star that we think could be very much like an Earth-like planet. So what's happening is that we're going to see more into the possible planets, exoplanets, and also the moons of our own stellar system. Triton, Neptune's moon, way out there, has ice and water. We know the surface of it. Enceladus, Saturn's moon, has been talked about by astronomers as one of the places that could most harbor life because it's got ice and plumes of ice shooting off of it. So there's water beneath the surface. And Europa, Jupiter's moon, is also a candidate for major life because there's so much water, and all of these formations are actually like cracks in ice that have formed. And there's actually a NASA mission called the Clipper mission launching in 2024. So by the time Neptune moves into Aries and Uranus is in Gemini, we'll be getting information back from that mission. And there's missions proposed for going to Triton, Neptune's moon. So we're on the cusp of something here in a big way. So here's a list of the transits. Yes, we'll try to get the slides to everyone. And we have a decade that is huge for all of us here. In summary, I want to invite you all to take the cosmic perspective. This is the book called Star Maker. And, you know, it says in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the coffin text, my soul is a star of gold, and with it I shall traverse the sky forever. We are destined to traverse the sky as stars because we're made of star stuff. This book by Olive Stapleton is a classic in science fiction, and it's really about moving our consciousness into the galaxy and beyond the galaxy into source. I really recommend it to everyone. It's a beautiful journey. And here's the White Tara, again, working with the idea of purification and purging ourselves of the old stories, of the attachments, and making sure that we send all of these vibrations this week out to all beings. This is called metta, right? Where we send out our prayers that all beings may be peaceful, happy, thrive, be safe, be healthy, right? And awaken to the true light of their nature, which is infinite, eternal source. Next week, we have a very special webinar called the Temples of Transformation, the Mystery School and your 2021 initiatory path. We are so excited to share this with you, Jocelyn and myself. It's happening next Thursday, November 5th. And the times you can see here, 11 a.m. Pacific. We'll be sending out an email about that. I want to invite in just maybe 2 questions if anyone has them. Again, you can check out the Return to Essence course. It's in the chat if you want to scroll up as well. So any questions before we jump into 80s performance here? Here you can find me at Divine Timing Online School and divinetimingcoaching.com. It's just been an honor to share this with you today, now and next year and into the future. I'm generally optimistic about 2021. I think it's going to really show us that we really must create our own realities. And that has a lot to do with our communities and how we align ourselves with the world as a whole. That was fascinating. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. It's been amazing. Wonderful. So informative. Thank you, Helen. They found more abundant water on the moon, announced it today. I want to know more about that, Benita. Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah, mark your calendars for the Temple of Transformation. It's happening November 5th. We'll be sending out more information. Thank you, Dana, Suzanne. All right, let's move on to 80's wonderful performance. Again, thank you all. It's been awesome to share with you. Namaste, many blessings. Enjoy the beautiful music from our great friend and performer, 80 Bell.
Thank you so much, VerDarLuz. That was incredible. Thank you for sharing all of this astrology and all that we have to look forward to. and navigate through. All right, well, welcome, 80. Thank you so much for being a part of this, 80. We're excited to have you here. Welcome, welcome.
So good, thank you. Oh.
And let me see, say something else because I have your volume. It was a little bit light at first, so let me just see how it is now. It's a little bit low. I don't, if there's any way you can increase the output.
Yeah, I think I can. We're going to be using this microphone for this part. And then let's see, let's bring it up a little bit. How about now? Am I a little better now?
Yes, that just got better.
All right.
Yes. Wonderful. And let me introduce you to everybody here. Hold on one second. I'm just waiting for my my info to pull up here. So everybody, I am excited to introduce you to 80. She is a pianist, vocalist, and a composer, and her specialty as a musician and healer is in the realm of the psyche. She observes and studies the archetypes and the stories behind our actions and our manifestations. Her live performance, A Journey to the Other World and Back, is designed to transport listeners to an oasis for the soul. For the last 15 years, 80 has performed solo and with her ensemble, Venus Exalted, at venues throughout the US. And her fourth release, Venus Exalted EP Volume 1, became available in May 2020. And 80, if you want to put in your Bandcamp link or anything like that, please feel free to go ahead. It would be wonderful to share that with everybody. 80 has a... She has a deep passion for the reclamation of women's wisdom, the healing arts, and reverence for all the cycles of life through music. Wonderful. So welcome, and tell us a little more, 80, about Wishcraft that you're going to be presenting and performing here for us today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, honored to be here, very excited. So Wishcraft is an experiment. It's a game that I've been playing for about 3 seasons now, and we've been doing it as a performance style ritual here in Southern Oregon.